So I've asked these amazing people who said yes at the last minute. We have Sarah Close from Blue Convergence, Antonius Gagern from Carbon to Sea, Kaitlyn Lowder from the Ocean Foundation, and Ali Chunovic from the Camille and Henry Dreyfus Foundation. I've asked each of them to describe their role at the foundation where they work, describe how funding priorities are determined, share updates on emerging interests and priorities at that foundation, provide some guidance on proposal process. How does it work? Do we reach out to program officers first? Who are the contacts for different science areas? And share opportunities and advice. Any advice, especially for early career scientists, is always welcome. So with that, I would love to I see Kaitlyn first on my screen, so I'd like to invite Kaitlyn to go first, and then we'll have some time for question and answer after we're done. So.
Cool. Thanks, Heather. I'm very happy to join you all. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Kaitlyn Lowder. I'm a program manager based at the Ocean Foundation. I myself am in Southern California, but the Ocean Foundation is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. And we're a community foundation. So we're the only community foundation for the ocean. And our mission is to improve global ocean health, climate resilience, and the blue economy. And we do this by creating partnerships to connect people in the communities in which they work to inform technical and financial resourcing so that they can achieve their ocean stewardship goals. As a community foundation, we raise every dollar that we spend. You may be familiar with other community foundations that are based locally. Here in San Diego, we have the San Diego Foundation. Seattle has the Seattle Foundation, New York Foundation. So we're a model of bringing together folks around a particular location. For us, that's the ocean. Right now, we are feeling, the same squeezes that many other scientific organizations are because of the challenges with funding and raising our own sustaining resources to continue working with our partners. So we don't have any open calls or unsolicited proposals right now, but we really work to leverage partnerships to advance our goals. So I want to share just a couple examples of that and how we engage with academic and government and other scientific communities to advance our work together around the globe. We have a couple of core initiatives at the Ocean Foundation that I think are relevant to this group here. We have a Blue Resilience Initiative, which is dedicated to advancing nature-based solutions for climate change mitigation and adaptation. That's particularly working in areas like the wider Caribbean region and really bringing together large-scale coastal habitat restoration conservation projects. But that often includes things like monitoring, understanding nutrients, water flow, carbon flow, and really working with local researchers and stakeholders to provide extensive training opportunities and bring in together that expertise with the scientists to create those conservation opportunities. But I work for our Ocean Science Equity Initiative, or EQUISY, which is a team of 4 of us led by our program officer, Alexis Valori Orton. So I'd be happy to connect you with her if that's of interest after this call. We work to ensure that all countries and communities can monitor and respond to changing ocean conditions, not just those with the most resources. And we do that in a couple different ways. We fund local experts. For us, that means most of our funding is going to researchers in countries that can receive overseas development assistance and through particular projects. So we have our portfolio of work that we do and really make sure that we're getting the funding out in line with those project goals. But some of our larger work is focused on what we call bridging the technical chasm for experts such as yourself with those researchers who are interested in gaining a footing in the field. And we also work to elevate underheard voices. So a couple of my colleagues are in Nice right now for the One Ocean Science Congress and the UN Ocean Conference, where we've brought together researchers from all over the globe to attend those sorts of events and step into that global field. But what I really want to talk about is that work to bridge the technical chasm, because that's where we really engage with scientific experts. We work on deploying kits of equipment to meet observation and monitoring gaps. So one such project is the GOA on in a Box, the Global Oceanification Observing Network in a Box kit, which is a set of more than 100 items. It's everything that a researcher needs to be able to conduct oceanification research or carbonate chemistry monitoring in the laboratory and in the field. And this is a place where we've engaged with scientific experts in academia and government offices, including Dr. Chris Sabine, Dr. Kim Curry, Dr. Melissa Melendez on this call right now, Dr. Andrew Dixon, to really come together and create those practices and the lower cost set of equipment to be able to address these sorts of conditions. So measuring total alkalinity, spec pH in the lab, collecting those water samples, and all the other variables that are needed in order to do the calculations on the back end. We've also been working with some partners to develop a complementary kit called the Gemini Box, which is the Global Eutrophication Monitoring Kit. We're sending out the first 9 to researchers all over the globe right now. And this will help researchers measure nutrients in their local waters, as well as dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll, turbidity, et cetera, to really capture what's going on in their local environments. So this is a place where we're continuing to be interested to build, to bring together those scientific experts who can share, what are the resources that are needed in order to meet the data quality goals of the researchers all over the globe. Maybe not necessarily the highest quality equipment, but what's good enough for those practical purposes for researchers who are getting that foot in the field. And that might also be something that's of interest to early career researchers that are just starting out, may not be able to have the funding for the hundreds of thousands of dollars to set up the highest quality lab, but could maybe get an entry point with some of these lower cost pieces to obtain those data and begin rolling on gathering that information. We also work to create practical best practices for our deployed equipment to ensure that those researchers and practitioners who may not have that luxury of specialization to still be able to obtain data that meets internationally accepted standards. So this is another place that we work with a number of experts. We've been working on the cookbook for oceanification research for a number of years now with more than 30 experts around the globe. We meet every month and have put together a first volume and are working on a second volume of practical methodologies to obtain weather quality data for oceanification research. And we're also working on developing low-cost technology. We're working with Dr. Burke Hales at Oregon State, but in the context of Chunovic, his LLC, to create the PCO2 to go, which is a low-cost handheld sensor for dissolved carbon dioxide. So we're always interested in exploring these new applications for low-cost technology and ensuring that we can help provide a way for researchers all over the globe to obtain those sorts of data. Our next area that we're really focused on is turning to marine carbon dioxide removal, given the interest in the carbon community. We know that, of course, there are many approaches likely with variable efficacy. And from our observations of working in the community so far, most of this research and thinking is based in those well-resourced countries like us. I'm here in the US, right? But in the next year, we're looking to build a series of training programs focused on marine carbon dioxide removal to ensure that there's diverse international scientific leadership in this emerging field. We think that with local experts everywhere, we're more likely to be able to introduce locally effective and appropriate technologies and ensure that researchers can inform their governments as proposals are coming in. And that really, as this community is building up, there's the foot in the field from everyone all over the globe. Where we might be looking for more additional input from the community is in building these training materials, and we are likely to have RFPs that are coming out to engage and support the scientific expertise into these sorts of training materials. So that's a place where we could potentially engage. And then lastly, I'll share just some advice for early career researchers for engaging with organizations outside of academia. When I was applying for graduate school, I had no idea that I needed to email professors and make that introduction. That wasn't something that I had learned at my undergraduate school, and somehow I still got into graduate school. So I learned then that it's important to make those connections and network and bring the community together. And then, I got into graduate school. I got in the habit of applying for grants. I had my whole tracker, knew when each opportunity opened, became used to responding to those sorts of funding inquiries and created my research program. after I left graduate school, spent a little bit of time in other organizations, and I entered the NGO sphere. I've been here less than 5 years, and I had to get out of that mindset again of applying to grants, to you know, seeing what opportunities were available and stepping in, which I think a lot of us are used to. Here in NGOs, we really work on developing relationships and sharing information about what we're working on. So my recommendation for those of you who are maybe more used to applying for grants is realizing that there's a lot of opportunities to share the work that you're working on at conferences, to start creating relationships with folks at maybe different funding organizations, and realizing that it's maybe not a necessarily response mechanism as I was used to, but more of a conversation to find those sorts of opportunities and realize where your goals may align with the needs and interests of funding entities. So I'll pause there. Happy to take any questions if we have time.
That was fantastic, Kaitlyn. Thank you so much for touching on all the different facets of the Ocean Foundation, but also providing such sound advice for our early career scientists on the line. I'm going to invite our next person to introduce, and then we'll do open Q&A at the end for all of the panelists together. I don't see anybody else. I can't see oh, there's Antonius. Antonius, why don't you go next? Talking about carbon to sea.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Antonius Gagern, Executive Director at Carbon to Sea, and thanks for inviting me to share a few things about our organization. We are a pretty unique organization because we have this one really narrow goal, which is to evaluate ocean-based carbon dioxide removal pathways and whether they should be part of a global climate response or not. And we're really focused on ocean alkalinity enhancement as kind of a starting point. And the cool thing about the organization is, I guess, that it's nonprofit and entirely funded by philanthropic donors, which means we can actually be open to all outcomes and truly think of the planet as our client. You know, we're 12 people now, and if you ask who's Carbon to Sea, the best answer is it is this odd dozen here. And I think what allows us to do good work is diversity of disciplines, and so that's really, really key, and that's really cool also about this community is how you bring together different disciplines. I think that's really, really core. So we have everything from the hardcore scientists to the policy experts to people with background in journalism, management consulting, marine robotics engineering, and so maybe just to say how we work as an organization. We're a philanthropically funded philanthropic funder, and that means we don't have an endowment ourselves, but we're a re-grantor. And the only reason that we can make grants to others is because some really fantastic bigger and smaller funders out there are supporting our mission and are trusting us to understand what's going on in the world and be and drive this field forward in the right way. I have a few slides here to just conceptualize a little more on like why we exist in the first place and why we focus on what we focus. But I think we can go through this really quickly in that this slide communicates that we need a lot of CO2 removal at some point in the future and that we're not there yet. The next slide shows that the ocean may be an interesting place to look at because it is the biggest carbon vault in the fast carbon cycle on the planet. And there are different ways to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. And the first big set of approaches is through photosynthesis, where you boost plant growth in the ocean to capture carbon into organic material. These approaches only work if the plant material is exported, meaning that it actually sinks to the deep ocean or gets permanently stored in coastal sediments. And the other block of approaches is what we're more focused on which leverages the acid-base system that's been responsible over hundreds of millions of years for really almost all of the carbon that is today stored in the deep ocean. Ocean alkalinity enhancement is the big overarching term for most of these approaches and is the focus of our organization because it is the theoretically most scalable ocean CDR approach for which there is the highest scientific confidence that atmospheric CO2 is actually and permanently removed. And since it still remains at a relatively low level of technical readiness, it is kind of at the sweet spot for philanthropy. Enormous potential, but a lot of issues still in the ocean alkalinity enhancement space. First, the research ecosystem is quite fragmented and thin, and much foundational work is still ahead. Second, governance is lagging, permitting is slow for field research, public trust is still fragile, a lot of work still needed. And third, the private sector is small and unregulated. For now, it's made up of responsible actors. I know most of the people, they are colleagues, they are friends. That might not last. We need clear standards and systems before scale makes reform harder. And so that's kind of where we try to come in and to play different roles. The first one is as a regranter. As I said, we spent over $30 million in the last 3 years on other organizations to drive research, build coalitions, engage key stakeholders. Second, we try to be a field builder, convening people, aligning on what we know and what we don't know, and on the priority research questions ahead, etc. Third, we are a bit of a standard setter for monitoring, for MRV questions, for community engagement, for environmental monitoring frameworks. And finally, we're trying to be a trusted partner between policy stakeholders, scientists, the private sector, and the broader field to make sure this conversation doesn't only happen in silos. And a few quick, I wanted to add a little bit of color to each one of these roles that we're trying to play before I go into how we make grants and how you can engage. So number one, on the kind of foundational research, since 2022, we've committed, I think, maybe 20 or $25 million to research teams worldwide to systematically study the safety, efficacy, durability, and measurability of OEE. Pictured here are these mesocosm facilities, in this case in Kiel, Germany, where researchers investigate the chemical and biological effects of different alkalinity concentrations in natural ocean water under controlled yet highly realistic conditions. Here is another example of our grant-making program. We've invested over $6 million in technology teams to develop proof of concept pilots, tackling critical ocean alkalinity enhancement challenges. And these innovations go all the way from alkalinity production to processing to delivery and quantification systems, driving progress through university teams, but also startups to rigorously test the cost effectiveness and scalability of OEE. So pictured here is a dosing module from the startup Planetary in Halifax, Canada, that modulates alkalinity delivery based on real-time pH measurements at the effluent, so that they can optimize for cost effectiveness and regulatory compliance. Another big part of our strategy is advancing real-world research around the world. This is really a new challenge for scientists and engineers and regulators. And we've been working on this for a long time. In 2022, we began building an R&D hub in Iceland, which I'm exemplifying here on the slide. Since then, we've identified the ideal fjord. We've established a locally owned marine research center called RUST. We've assembled a team of 30 plus experts across many disciplines to collect baseline data, model ocean dynamics, engineer alkalinity dispersion systems, install sensors, and apply for Europe's, I think, first permit for ocean alkalinity release. It takes a lot of different skills and people to get this right. And so we pictured here is our retrofitted research tugboat, with which we already conducted really nice air-sea gas exchange experiments with dual tracers. So, and then lastly, government has a really important role to play to enable R&D, and we've been engaging with hundreds of officials in the last few years, also making some strategic grants across some priority countries. And we've become the gravitational center for decision makers seeking unbiased expertise, and that's really, really helpful. So let me just say, oh yeah, and then we have this annual convening. This is actually last year's convening. We had one just a couple of weeks ago, which is really fantastic to bring scientists together and funders and policymakers, NGOs and startups to just talk about where are we in this field right now and what comes next. These meetings are extremely helpful for the broader convening community. Thinking about this community, and I took a quick look at the attendance here. I know hardly anyone, and all of but I attended a couple of years ago one of the OCB workshops, and what struck me there is just the diversity of expertise that comes together here. And here, just wanted to say, if you're working on anything related to what OCB is working on, this field needs you. And even if you don't, the field probably also needs you. There are these 4 really key questions that guide our work. Does it work? Is it safe? Can we quantify it? Can it scale? And each of these questions just requires a whole lot of different people thinking about similar questions from different perspectives, and then coming together and discuss it and understanding each other as well. So the first thing that I'll say is this field is really cool because it allows people, even who are extremely deep in one vertical, to go and share what they've been working on with a broader community who's really hungry for that particular piece of knowledge. I heard somebody say the other day that geochemistry was kind of pulled from the depth of the nerd universe into the applied world of CDR through these geochemical CDR proposals that together with OAE, also ERW and others, that are really requiring that kind of expertise. Then how to get in touch with us. I'll just say, get in touch with us. First of all, there are a bunch of RFPs that are going to come up in the next 12 months or so, some on ecotoxicology, some on fisheries, on OE impact on fisheries, some on field research around the world, and we're planning to do quite a bit in the next. Some also on model intercomparison projects and so on. So make sure that you go to our webpage and scroll all the way down to just register for updates, because we will send these updates through monthly newsletters and things like that. Keep us in the loop on projects you're doing, things you think should be on our radar. this is really what we're trying to be, is a bit of a, the spider in the middle of the web. And we can only do our work if we have a proper understanding of what else is going on. We can do that actively, but it's actually easier to do it as a filter feeder, to be fed as much of the information from the field. And now it's getting more difficult because this field is growing. So please get in touch and reach out and say, here's something cool that we think should be on your radar. And then there are, if you have specific R&D funding requests for smaller projects that are highly additional to the field, just reach out to David Keller, our R&D director. He will thank me afterwards for, suggesting this to a room full of scientists here. But, do get in touch. We sometimes can have the flexibility within our grant making process to do that. But most of our work will be funded through RFPs. And then I guess I was asked to say a few words about early career, like advice, and that's really hard. I don't think that I have anything smart to say or helpful to say here, but really, really high level. And I don't want to sound like a self-help book from the airport bookstore, but humility, no matter how deep your expertise, you probably know almost nothing about 99% of what's, outside of the world. And that's not an insult, it's just math, right? So act accordingly, ask questions, admit gaps, say out loud you don't understand what alkalinity is. Nobody does. People respect honesty, and you learn 10 times faster when you ask questions and admit that you don't know everything. Courage is another one that I think is really important. I don't know exactly how to put it, but a lot of science happens inside a box of incentives. Publish this, chase that grant, don't rock the boat. But that box will quietly waste your time if you let it. And courage means solving for what actually matters and not just what fits. And that doesn't always mean changing the world. Sometimes it just means saying no to bad ideas or bad projects, and you probably have more freedom than you think, and you'll regret not using it. And then, unfortunately, hard work. Oh, the vector. Yeah, what did I really want to say with that? You need to know what you're optimizing for. Otherwise, someone else will decide for you. Are you trying to optimize for money, for impact, for prestige, for time to serve? And I think any answer is fine, but pick one. My personal one is I want to work with the smartest people on the hardest problems. I really like that. And that helps me say no to almost everything else. You have to figure out like what's your vector. It's very easy to get busy and go nowhere, but just figure out like what's your vector, and that's hard. And then hard work. I mean, working hard doesn't guarantee success, but it makes most other things easier. Yes, the system is not fair always, and it's quite noisy, but still, if you show up, if you finish things, if you put in more cycles, you tend to get better faster. And that sounds like a stupid additional advice here, but I think it really matters. So I'll leave it at that. Do get in touch, and thanks.
Thanks so much, Antonius, and such fabulous ecological metaphors throughout that. I loved it. Next, let's see who we have on the line. Sarah from the Blue Convergence Fund.
Great. I do not have slides, so I'm just going to talk for a little while. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for including me in this. My name is Sarah Close. I am a program director at Blue Convergence Fund, which is a new philanthropic organization. So if you haven't heard of us yet, that's probably why. I'm based remotely in Washington, D.C., and I'm really happy to be here. So Blue Convergence Fund launched in March, but even though we are pretty new still, we are building on many years of experience from the Lenfest Ocean program, which is winding down at the end of this month. Our director, Charlotte Hudson, led the Lenfest Ocean program for much of its 20-year history, and prior to coming to BCF, I spent the past 8 years at the Lenfest Ocean program, building and managing their climate impacts on oceans grant portfolio. And some other members of our team are also coming over from the Lenfest Ocean program. So if you know Lenfest, some of the way we work and our mission will sound familiar. We are sort of evolving off of that starting point. We aim to ensure that new knowledge is collaboratively produced, broadly yet strategically communicated, and considered in management and policy decisions and discussions. So our focus is really on supporting the co-designed and co-produced research that's driven by an understanding of needs and works from the very outset of a project to be responsive to what people need, to share information in a transparent and ongoing way throughout projects and often for a while after they finish up, and to produce scientific research that comes out with results that are useful and usable. So as part of this, we have a strong focus on, not surprisingly, outreach and engagement. And we have staff capacity within our team that's dedicated to working with our grantees to support engagement, both within projects themselves, as well as across funded projects on a topic to sort of help raise things up to a different level. At Blue Convergence Fund, our work is organized into topical portfolios. I direct our portfolio that's focused on building climate resilient fisheries around the world. We've also recently announced a new portfolio that will be focused on ocean biodiversity, which will initially be US focused and will launch in earnest later this summer after some of our colleagues at the Lenfest Ocean program move over to Blue Convergence Fund. So I'll talk mostly about our climate resilient fisheries portfolio today. In this portfolio, our work will be international in scope as we aim to develop case studies and examples that the global community can learn from and help to advance both the science and the practice of climate resilient fisheries management. To us, connecting the research we are funding to key needs on the ground, whether those come from decision makers, community members, rights holders, or other types of stakeholders on a particular issue is really critical. So that's often where we start. Our approach on this topic will focus on 3 key strategies. One is targeted convenings, so bringing together experts to identify needs, priorities, and opportunities to integrate new information into management practices. Another, not surprisingly, is grant making, so supporting these efforts that can translate research into actionable management solutions. And I'll talk a little bit more about what different types of grant making might look like for us. And then we also have a dedicated pillar focused on community building. So really strengthening partnerships, fostering new connections, and prioritizing relationships to drive action. So at Blue Convergence Fund, the majority of our grant making will be done through open requests for proposals. Unlike the previous speakers, we don't have any funded projects yet, so I don't have nice examples or pictures I can show you. But really the best way to find out about any new opportunities will be through signing up for our newsletter, and I can put that link in the chat after I'm done. And all of these strategies across like targeted convenience, grant making, and community building will really be fit for purpose. So for instance, on grant making, the scope and topics of different RFPs will vary between different opportunities based on what we've heard the needs are and where we think we can make the biggest difference. Some RFPs might be global in scope, but asks for different types of projects or a specific type of project, which might vary from more heavily research-oriented to more engagement-oriented activities, just based on what we've heard about the need and what we think is, the right path forward. Some RFPs at the same time might be more narrowly focused geographically, but have a broader remit in terms of the types of projects that we might support in a specific geographic region. So I really do encourage folks to keep an eye out on the newsletter, and even if the first RFP is not a good fit for what you do, know that there will be other opportunities, and they're not all going to look the same across portfolios and across different RFPs. In terms of advice or, other sort of general information, I'd echo the previous speakers that individuals are really welcome to reach out to us, even though we don't typically develop grants through targeted conversations. We still rely on those conversations to really understand what are people working on, where's the science going, what are different communities across these issues, concerned about, or what are managers concerned about, and so on. And I think that extends beyond grant making to really inform our convenings and community building as well. We just finished a workshop last week focused on climate resilient fisheries in the US, and being able to hear from people across lots of different perspectives is really valuable for understanding the field and also knowing who to reach out to in the future if an issue comes up and we, need a network of people to go to with questions. So, on that note, I think the last thing I'll say in terms of advice is really to build your networks, which I think you've heard a lot of, not surprisingly, but not just among your scientific colleagues, but others working in your space, so that you can understand, what your specific slice of the pie is, but also how that might fit in the broader picture and some of the needs and challenges that are faced by others in your field who are using your science, and what that might mean for the way your science should look in the future. So I think, those conversations are really valuable. We talked a lot in the workshop we had last week about the importance of sort of showing up and leading with trust and humility. And I think that's a really critical thing to start practicing early on in your career and getting a sense of how to do that in different venues. So I will stop there.
Thank you, Sarah. That was fantastic. I looked on the Blue Convergence website, and you can scroll. It's just like the OCB website. You can scroll to the bottom and there's a thing to enter your email address to subscribe to the newsletter. And I encourage you to follow all of these very carefully, and we'll be trying to track them in the OCB newsletter as well. Finally, last but not least, we have, and I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly. Is it Ali or Ali Chunovic?
Ali Chunovic, yeah.
Chunovic, great. Well, she is here from the Camille and Henry Dreyfus Foundation, and take it away.
Thanks so much for introducing me and inviting me. So the Camille and Henry Dreyfus Foundation is a little bit different from some of the other funders that you've heard from today. We are a private foundation, so we have an endowment and we make grants from that endowment. We're also more broadly dedicated to the advancement of the chemical sciences, so chemistry and engineering. But what that means is it also includes, a lot of the disciplines that are represented here in the audience. I know we're a little bit short on time, so I think what I'm going to mainly focus on is our early career awards. Those are our flagship programs. That's where the majority of our funding goes to. We have two, the Camille Dreyfus Teacher Scholar Awards and the Henry Dreyfus Teacher Scholar Awards. They are targeted at different audiences, but for the most part, serve about the same purpose. So they are early career awards. They can be in any discipline that's related to the chemical sciences. And what we're looking for is achievement in both teaching and research. And we give out unrestricted research grants, which, can be hard to come by. So whatever, we leave it up to our constituency to decide what is the best use case for these funds. Our Camille program is specifically targeted at researchers who are in PhD granting departments, where our Henrys are directed at PUIs generally, so non-PhD granting institutions. And we do that so that we're making sure that we give funds to a variety of different researchers across institutions. It's a limited submissions program, so I generally encourage people to talk to your Office of Sponsored Research or your foundation relations team to see if there's already some sort of process in place for selecting someone, and if there's not, potentially encourage them to start a process to select people for nomination each year. You are talking to currently 1/3 of the foundation. We are incredibly small, but we do have a large team of board members, advisors, and reviewers who lend their scientific expertise to making sure that the best grant decisions are made. And we're always happy to, and I've heard this theme kind of echoed throughout all of the presenters, but we're always happy to hear what your ideas are. Even though we make our grants primarily in these discrete programs, the Teacher Scholar Awards being our flagship, but we also have the Dreyfus Prize for late career researchers and a lectureship program that also provides support for summer students and PI summer salary. We want to hear, from our constituency, and we're constantly having conversations with people to learn about what matters to our community. So, in that spirit, we would love to have you reach out if you have any ideas or if there's something you're really passionate about. And if we hear about it, enough, then that's something that could potentially become a future funding priority for us. We are flexible in that way. And, an example of that is for a while we did fund a machine learning program. Right now, funding for machine learning has really gone up quite a bit. And so we stepped back because we are a smaller foundation. But, we had been hearing that was something that our constituency was interested in and something that was, gaining momentum. And we wanted to be there to help support that, as it kind of took off. Let's see. In addition to your ideas, one of the things that I really love about working at the Dreyfus Foundation is that we really want to make sure that, the best proposals go to our viewers and the best awards are made. And because of that, we really have an open door policy. If you have a question, I think especially for early career researchers, it can feel intimidating to reach out to a foundation. Speaking for our foundation, I would love it if you contacted me if you have a question, because it's much easier to resolve those questions prior to the deadline, or prior to disqualification of a proposal past the deadline, than not hearing from you. And we want to make sure that everyone, whether they're at a small institution that maybe doesn't have a precedent for award winners or, a robust support system, to bigger, more resourced institutions, has the support that they need to be able to apply, feel comfortable with our process, and have all their questions answered. So I can put our general email in the chat, but that does go to me and the rest of the team. So, if we need to have a conversation, if we need to have a back and forth via email, I'm happy to do that and talk in more detail about, eligibility and all the different requirements we have for those programs. And I'll wrap it up with just a piece of advice. I'm not a PhD scientist. I have worked at 3 foundations though now, so I can give you a little bit of advice from the other side of the aisle. I think every funder is kind of its own thing. It's a snowflake, and so getting to know your funders, getting to know, for example, working here, we very much have an open door policy, and we want people to reach out. Some places, you submit an LOI and you kind of wait to hear back just because of their capacity or their size or their regulations. So do a little research, figure out, a little bit about each funder. And I think that'll take you a long way in terms of, what next steps are. And forming relationships with us. We love to hear from people. We love to have those personal relationships with our grantees, with scientists, that might make them come to mind if there's a speaking engagement that, we're looking for panelists for or something like that. So like I said, every foundation's a snowflake, but doing your research, trying to make connections with foundations, I think is really important. And then on top of that, just getting to know, your Office of Sponsored Research or your foundation relations team. I talk to so many representatives, and they really want people to, be engaged and ask about opportunities and apply for things. That is literally their job. So, if you have questions or if you have interests in applying for something or creating a pathway for others to apply for things, like, you know, having a good relationship with that team is always incredibly helpful. So I think I answered all the questions. I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, I don't know if we have time for Q&A. If we do, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, I will put our email in the chat so that you can reach out to us and we can have a one-on-one conversation.
Thanks so much, Allie. Thank you to all of you. Do send us your ideas if there are foundations that you've worked with that you think would be really relevant for supporting OCB science, or even early career opportunities, fellowships, and other awards. I think that's, you know, we try to provide a lot of information, but we can't have our tendrils on everything. So do share that, and let's try to centralize. And, you know, like as Antonius said, I really loved this analogy. We want to be the spider in the middle of the web. You know, we want to help connect you, the connective tissue for this community. So with that, I want to thank our panelists again so much for joining us. I know it was a last minute ask with our pivot to virtual. So thank you so much, and let's stay in touch.